Today I'm fielding 3 questions that I've received recently about fundraising, and these are about events, donor fatigue, and if you're starting out and looking for new ideas, where should you turn to? Hi, I'm Brice Sokolowski, the founder of catholic.fundraiser.net, a website that is answering questions on how to fundraise in the Catholic context. Before we dive into these questions, and I take questions from people every week, you can answer them on my website. If you download the free guide, The 10 Commandments to Catholic Fundraising, that's the 10 Commandments to Catholic Fundraising, you can jump over to my website, catholic.fundraiser.net. You'll see usually some type of image that says, hey, download your free guide. You download it absolutely for free. It's been downloaded by tens of thousands of Catholics. Overall consensus is 2 thumbs up. They love it. And on top of that, when you join, you can ask me a question, and you get the chance of me answering it right here on the podcast. And I usually send emails as well to people and answering them directly. So make sure that you download absolutely for free the 10 Commandments. So let's dive into these 3 questions. So question number 1 is what to do when you just have a few events but nothing really structured with your fundraising. I'm glad that this person has asked this question, especially with what's going on right now. At this moment, we've got the pandemic, and well, we can't meet. And so this is a great time to rethink events. Events with regards to fundraising, in fact, is not always the best thing to do. I know that might sound like a novelty, and maybe it's the first time you've heard it, but a lot of fundraisers, a lot of very, very good fundraisers actually don't like events when it comes to fundraising. They like events when it comes to, organizing, bringing the community together, bringing people to learn about the mission. So there's nothing wrong about those, but things that are designed specifically around, well, we're going to ask for a donation, it's not always the best thing to do. Well, look at what's been happening now. We can't meet, so if you were hoping to fundraise with events, you really can't do that anyways. And you have so many things going against you. The weather, other events, there's just so many things outside of your control, where if you're focusing on a few events throughout the year to fundraise, it's probably not the best thing to do. So my recommendation is think about other things to do with fundraising, and I'll get to that in one of the other questions. So step number 1 is just the answer to the first question is reconsider events. If you can't do events, it's probably a good thing, and look at other ways, and I'll be answering what those are in a second. The second question is what to do about donor fatigue. Donor fatigue is a myth. It's an absolute myth. It doesn't exist if, I guess, you're doing your job very well. And it's not necessarily the fundraiser doing their job very well. It's the apostolate that's doing a really good job on communicating what you're doing, spreading the message, informing people. If you continue to do something incredible, as I assume is what your apostolate is doing, you're doing God's will, you're doing what God has asked you to do, there should be no reason for donor fatigue, because God is always going to be nudging you to do more, to do more, and to do more. So donor fatigue only really exists in your own mind, probably because you've just been asking and asking and asking, and you feel like, oh boy, I think I'm really pushing it too much, because you really haven't balanced all your other communications. If you join one of my programs that I have on catholic.fundraiser.net, I walk you through how to communicate to people so you don't create that donor fatigue, because donor fatigue will only come from you. It doesn't come from other people. There's donor boredom, where they're like, well, I don't really like this apostolate, so they'll leave. That's not fatigue. So you can't assume that you can ask too much, or that there's a finite amount of generosity out there. It just doesn't exist. I'll try and find an article that I published probably a little over a year and a half ago on this topic. I did research, I found books, and overall, donor fatigue doesn't exist. So you don't need to worry about it because it doesn't exist except in your own mind, and that's usually because you're probably not approaching fundraising the correct way, which is balancing your communications. So that's question number 2. Question number 3, which connects to question number 1, is this whole concept of events and trying to find new, fresh approaches for an annual fundraiser. So in reality, you should be fundraising year-round. Now that is a loaded phrase, and it doesn't mean asking everybody all the time. Then you might create what is the myth, donor fatigue, where it's just people get bored of hearing you ask. That's what is the reality. But you should be looking at finding different innovative ways of asking for donations. For example, you can just meet people one-on-one. I know it takes time. You can call people. I know that takes time as well. You can learn to use your website a bit more. You can learn how to use social media a bit more. You should learn how to communicate with people and connect with them. So that's, I would say, is a new and fresh approach. Is I don't think enough apostolates are taking this idea of communicating with people seriously enough, especially when it comes to the internet. And that there's a whole lot of things that you can go around doing that. Email, posts, blogging, vlogging, podcasts, communicating with people. So the fresh approach is learning how to communicate in the 21st century, in the new evangelization. If you want more on that, I highly recommend that you download the 10 Commandments. There's a guide. I walk you through 10 things that I think you should be doing. I find it quite innovative because they're not that difficult to implement, and they're very, very successful. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, this video. Share it with a friend. If you have a question, go to catholicfundraiser.net, download the free guide, and you have the opportunity to ask a question. God love you, and speak to you next week. Bye-bye.